evening, everyone. Thank you so much for coming out. What in Scottsdale is our version of the polar vortex, right?
Well, we're wondering.
50-something degrees. I was about to tell our authors that Phoenicians are such weather wimps that the first drop of rain or the first time the temperature goes down under 50, that we have a hardy Brit over here, right? Use the microphone.
Hardy New Yorker, actually.
Oh, you are?
And originally from Richmond, Virginia, but believe me, I'd rather be here because we left the solar vortex and there's no complaining.
And how about you two? You are actually E.G. Scott together.
We are also hardy New Yorkers.
That is right. We all came from the same polar region. So this is a relief. This is spring.
And you can tell with my weather inappropriate shoe wear that I did not know the weather would be as it is.
We didn't either.
It's not wet, so all that is good. Anyway, I'm delighted to have you here. This is the first appearance by both authors. Can I just refer to you in the singular?
Absolutely.
While to introduce everybody. And so that's always exciting to meet new people, new voices, and find out about new books. So let's see, where shall we start? Why don't we start with you?
Okay.
Okay. So if you read the Scottsdale Republic today, they had a very nice write-up about Gray's book, Flight of the Fox. And let me start out by asking you, why did you decide that the 50th anniversary of Woodstock would be a seminal moment in which to set your thriller?
Well, I live in New York City, but I'm lucky enough to have a small home about 2 hours north of the city in the woods, near the town of Bethel, and so every time I go to this home, we drive past the town of Bethel. And for those of you old enough to remember, Bethel is the site of the Woodstock Rock Festival that took place in August 1969. So I was writing this Run for Your Life thriller, and I thought, I'm going to set it slightly in the future because I'm going to play a little bit with gizmos and inventions and drones and things that might be very close in the future, not so much as to make it dystopian or science fiction. And then I was thinking, what's going to happen in what anniversaries are coming up in the near future? And I picked on Woodstock, and I thought that would resonate with readers. And so I just set it near Bethel, near the Woodstock Rock Festival. And the 50th anniversary is coming up in the novel. It is in fact coming up in Bethel, and they're making some big plans, and I think we might even be invited to participate in a little event when it happens in August. We'll see how it goes.
Now, you wouldn't know this, but Woodstock is a watchword in my family. My husband, who's younger than I am, is a real rock and roll guy, so Woodstock was a seminal moment in his life, which was the year he graduated from college. I was by then too old to think about going to Woodstock, plus I had 2 small children, so it wasn't going to happen. But I mean, it was a really, it's one of those kind of landmark moments in time by which we often refer back. Peter Robinson, wrote a book that was rooted in a rock festival in England. I don't think it wasn't Woodstock, but it was something. Or was it Woodstock? I might have to think about that because he's been in America.
I'm not sure myself.
Yeah, well, he's very into music, and his guy, Inspector Banks, is always. But I know that Woodstock or the British equivalent, whatever it was, featured in one of the Banks histories.
It's always fun to resonate that sort of event with the readers because they feel like they're in the place and in the time and they understand what's happening. And I've gotten great feedback from readers that they really appreciate that aspect. That's really only the opening, and then of course because it's a Run for Your Life story, it goes from upstate New York into the city and then Washington, D.C.
Right, so you do move around.
Yeah.
You guys, on the other hand, have a more restricted landscape for your book. So why did you choose, we're going to start out with landscape here, why did you choose to set it where you did?
Sure. I think we were trying to find, because of the sort of the different story threads that go into it, we're dealing with opioid addiction, which is a big problem out in that area of Long Island.
We should say it's Long Island is the setting.
Yeah, it's sort of,
Right.
Yeah, exactly. Mid-Island, Long Island, Suffolk County, if anyone's familiar with that area. But I grew up on Eastern Long Island, so I actually know not that particular area exactly, but very close to it. And certain plot threads in there just made sense for that part of the world. That seemed like a good town to explore a lot of the things that we sort of try and explore in the book in terms of some of the social aspects.
Well, you know, when we hear of Long Island, we tend to think of the Hamptons, you know, and gorgeous estates and the whole bit. But the truth is, a lot of Long Island was like potato farming and pretty much a subsistence. I'm trying to think of the name. There's an author. He's gone, so I can't ask Patrick. Who writes for Perseverance Press and is now the publisher. And he said a whole series about a guy that lives in the 99% of Long Island rather than the 1%, which is, that's the great thing about reading mystery. You can learn all this completely useless stuff that, without actually having to do research. But it's surprising when you read a lot of it, how knowledgeable you become about areas that you otherwise would never visit.
Right.
So, you know, if I were in Long Island, I'd like to think I might have been the Hampton side of it, but not necessarily. Right. So opiates a real problem there, like West Virginia or Maine or any of these poor areas?
It's a big problem, and it's that part. You have sort of there's a bit of economic disparity as well. You do have some, you know, well-off people, but then you have a real working class scene, and some of the opioid stuff is actually not as sort of class oriented as it is in some of the poorer parts. You have a lot of kind of recreational drugs and prescription abuse that happens in the sort of the you know, upper echelon out there as well. It's a kind of a mixed bag. It's interesting in that way.
And in the course of writing the book, we were trying to really keep up on the statistics and what was happening, and it was something staggering. Like there had been triple the number of opioid-related deaths in just the last year than the previous.
Yeah.
So the kind of escalation and speed of it. I mean, the upside of that is it seemed like the counties were being much more diligent, and there was efforts being made, but it was kind of staggering when we started to dip into the actual numbers.
So what you've actually written is what we either call trust no one, or domestic suspense, or psychological thriller, or whatever various words. How does opioid addiction play into your story?
Well, one of our protagonists, Rebecca, who you meet right from the outset of the book, was a pharmaceutical rep.
Right.
And she's kind of on the other side of the pharmaceutical rep game, where she's been doing it for a long time, and the industry has changed tremendously. And actually, when we first meet her, she loses her job, and you find that she's losing it under suspicious circumstances, and those are, of course, she's been taking the supply. So she has a pretty raging fentanyl addiction at this point, and we talk about fentanyl a lot specifically because that's specifically the drug that is the biggest problem right now.
Right.
So we're kind of threading through her experiences in the pharmaceutical industry and being a rep, but also being an addict, and kind of what that means and the, you know, fatal effects it has on her marriage.
Yeah, it's really young reader. What I remember reading about was people who would like get jobs in candy stores or ice cream parlors and have to, you know, restrain themselves from eating all the merchandise, or they would actually get specific allowances, like, you know, an ice cream cone per shift or something. And, you know, you don't really think of that as, you know, a pharmaceutical rep, but the truth is you could dip right into it, right?
Yes. And
So there's an amazingly high addiction rate in the medical profession, partly just because it's so available.
Yeah. That's slippery slope kind of.
Right. So back to you, a mathematician. You've got a thing on the run, but you've got a guy that's a somewhat unlikely action hero.
Yes, his name is Sam Teegarden, a lovely name, and he is a mathematics professor at Columbia University, and he's spending the summer at his pied-à-terre in upstate Bethel, New York, when suddenly he has to go on the run. These mysterious black ops hit teams are trying to do him harm. And to save his life, he flees from his home with nothing but the clothes he's wearing and his wallet and his car keys. And he's a mathematics professor, and I did that intentionally because I thought, well, anything that's on the run is going to resonate with readers of Jason Bourne, of course, by Robert Ludlum. And I read everything Ludlum ever wrote, and I liked him a lot. But I didn't want it to be an imitation of that. I didn't want to emulate it in any way other than just a on-the-run story. So I thought, instead of making him a secret agent or a karate chopper or a gunplay person, he is an arithmetic teacher. That's what he does. That means he's a smart man, and that is his only weapon, his intelligence and his will to live. And he really doesn't know anything about karate or guns. So he has to outsmart the bad guys rather than just whoop them.
Well, I mean, it's fun to have a thriller, you know, where you don't have a superhero or a specially out-trained guy or a Navy SEAL or whatever it might be, you know. But Tom Perry writes really good books like that. Did you read his book, The Old Man?
I have not, but I'm going to remember it now.
Well, it's a somewhat similar, not
Okay.
implying that there's any cross, between you, but, it's a guy that wanders into things, by, unwittingly, so to speak. Although I have to think now that I remember the book, he actually was a trained up and was just disguised as an ordinary guy, now that I think of it, so his skills came back to him. But still, the way it kicks off is more or less the same.
This is an ordinary man. He actually, not giving anything away, he actually almost has a nervous breakdown. He cries a couple of times. He just wants this to stop. But then his will to live, his self-preservation kicks in, and he figures out the weaknesses of the people that are trying to harm him. And he prevails. Shall I just give a hint at the reason why they're trying to harm him?
It's called Secret Documents.
It's called a secret document. He figures out he has an encoded document in his email inbox. And because he's a mathematics professor and he knows something about software, he decodes the document and he figures out it's a diary written by a man named Clyde Anderson Tolson, who was a real gentleman. Anybody know who he was? He was J. Edgar Hoover's lover for 40 years. And Clyde Anderson Tolson inherited J. Edgar Hoover's estate. They were partners. And in the fiction, this is completely fiction, in my novel, he writes a diary and every passage begins, Dear John. And it isn't about the fact that they were gay or anything like that. It's about the fact that he tangentially reveals in this diary stuff that, were it to ever be published, would dramatically alter our understanding of American history.
Wow, it could be unfolding right on the front page as we speak.
Yeah.
Oh, Lord.
And I would,
You have to ask if J. Edgar Hoover could possibly have gotten away with his life today, and the answer is probably no.
I don't think so, no, because we're so much more well, we just tattle on each other these days, don't we?
Absolutely. You can think about JFK. Everybody protected him, as compared to Bill Clinton, for example.
I know people who knew both JFK and RFK, covered them as reporters, and they knew. And I would say, why didn't you? And you know what his answer was? I don't know. Why didn't you report on him? I don't know. We just didn't.
It's a very different culture. So, how did you get together to write a book? I mean, this is your first collaboration, right?
It is.
So, what inspired you to work together?
So Greg and I have been very close friends for 23 years. We met our first week of college, freshman year. We were acting theater undergrads at Marymount Manhattan College, and became really close friends quickly because I think we realized we had very similar taste in plays, movies, and certainly books. We were both voracious readers. We came from families of writers and readers, and kind of always said we were going to do something together.
Yeah.
We did acting, and then
We had a theater company, and then later we had writers groups as well. So we actually had worked, in tandem in terms of just more writing exercises in short form, and then we were both writing short fiction, submitting to lit journals and things, and we would sort of edit each other's stuff or be readers for each other, and I think we fell into a pretty good routine in terms of being able to collaborate
Right.
and just have that feel.
And I think we both realized we didn't want to be actors, but we wanted to create and write. And when I graduated college, I went into book publishing. So I was in book publishing for 18 years. I was a book publicist and then an associate publisher, and I was kind of writing in secret and never really finishing anything. And Greg was doing a bunch of different things while he was writing. And then we had a pretty pivotal period in both of our lives where I went through a very painful relationship ending. Very long-term relationship where the person I was with turned out not to be the person that I thought they were. And Greg was having a very challenging year also.
Yeah. So I lost my dad to cancer within a few months of each other. These sort of two events happened,
Right.
and I think we got together and tried to figure out something to do with that energy and that kind of the grief, a way to
Right.
sort of use that constructively.
Sorry.
Oh, fine.
We were having dinner, as we did pretty much once a week, our entire friendship, and I was just talking about kind of the anger and the grief and how much our lives had changed kind of in this very short period of time, and both wanting to do things that we had said we were going to do but not do, knowing kind of the mortality piece, but also I I think I said to Greg, I really want to kill someone. Let's plot a murder, and let's do it together on the page.
We'll keep it on the page. We'll keep it on the page.
Revenge is a very powerful driver.
It certainly
It
is.
sure
So,
is.
but given your background, your theater background, did you always see this in part as a movie? Because there's a lot of interest in your book for the movies.
Right. We actually are really fortunate. We have a TV option that's in development right now.
Right.
But we never actually, we didn't set out to write it even as a book. We did it as a writing exercise. So I sent a chapter to Greg from the point of view of Rebecca, and his response was to that chapter in the voice of Paul. And really our goal was to shock the other, and this story kind of was born out of this idea of what happens when two people are married for so long and they stop communicating, and the kind of fatal and suspicious, all of the things that happens when they stop talking to each other but start assuming.
Right. And just how far you could take that in a storyline. How much you could ratchet that up.
So they're not communicating, they're both assuming, she's addicted to opioids, and we probably shouldn't say what he's up to. And nothing good can come of it, right? I mean, you just know that.
I don't know, TV option sounds pretty good
Well,
to me.
no, I meant in terms of this couple on their wayward path, but that's interesting because we just, for one thing, I have to say Simon & Schuster must be a hotbed for incubating new writers. Just a couple weeks ago, we had the two people who've written An Anonymous Girl here,
Greer
and
and
she
Bess.
was an editor at Simon & Schuster, so maybe it's Simon & Schuster down, on lunch breaks or something. They have a secret writing room.
Well, I think that the number of writers who end up going into book publishing is really high. I think there's a lot of unfinished novels in the desks of people, who
Oh,
go
that's
into
true.
that industry.
And some of them work in bookstores.
And they're book lovers and readers, booksellers.
We have a writer and a critic who works in the bookstore, and then we have me who's actually never wanted to do either, but just loves to read. So, it is interesting that the profession attracts people who are interested in it, but not necessarily in the same aspects of it.
Right.
Which is fun. What brought you into wanting to write a book?
Well, I've been desiring to be a writer really since I was a child, and one reason why I went into broadcast news was to be around the written word, and I was a news writer
Right.
for almost 30 years. I also did editing and producing, and just always wanted to write. And then when the financial crisis came and I was laid off, instead of scrambling to get freelance work and part-time work in New York City, which is where all the networks are and where I would have ended up, I just decided I don't want to do that anymore. Life, the clock is ticking, and I want to start writing. And in the 9 years I've been, since I got laid off, I've published 3 novels, and that's a pretty good record. So I'm having a great time.
But you didn't come to it as a writing virgin then. You already had. I like to use that word. So you only really get to use it in general as a youth, but still, you had obviously years of writing and editing and all the rest behind you.
I basically had the fundamental skills and certainly the desire, but what's most important is discipline. When I talk to aspiring writers, I always say there's only one rule: butt in chair, hands on keyboard. And if you're smart, you'll teach yourself. And so I had to learn the discipline, and once I was really going at it for a living, you have to get up in the morning and go to the keyboard. You just have to do it, and that's how you become a writer.
Mm-hmm. Well, you too obviously have honed your skills as well. Was it scary to write a book as opposed to working on other people's books?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, Greg and I have both been writing since high school, but I never was really showing people outside of writers groups, and it was very scary not only to have worked as a book publicist, so been kind of a doula of writers, so to speak, when they're out on the road and going through the publishing experience. I didn't know that I necessarily had the stomach for that. My comfort is to be in the chair writing behind the scenes, which is that's a big reason why we used the pseudonym. And I'll let you answer as well.
Well, in terms of, you were asking more, I think, from the publishing point of view. For me, it was, it's been an adjustment for sure to have that exposure, be out there.
And now you're here, so
Yeah.
it's yet another role,
Yeah,
which is,
yeah.
I know writers don't get to just stay in their lonely rooms in their chairs anymore. At the
Sure.
end of the day, you have to come out and do some. You and I met over Ann Rule.
Yes.
You brought Ann to the store years ago,
I
or
did,
did we
yeah.
do it by email? But you were
No,
actually here.
I
weren't
was
you?
here, yeah. She was one of the favorite writers I ever got to work with. I had been reading her true crime since I was in high school. My mom actually wrote her dissertation on the psychodynamics of childhood serial killers. So,
I remember that evening because Ann Rule, as you may or may not know, wrote her first book because she actually sat and worked alongside Ted Bundy
Right.
without realizing who Ted Bundy was, because he was a charming psychopath. And so she wrote, I'm trying,
The Stranger Beside
thank
Me.
you, The Stranger Beside Me, right, which propelled her into, and then she had a long career writing true crime. When she came here, I think that her emphysema was beginning to really take a toll on her.
Yeah.
And so we didn't see her, I think we might have seen her twice, but she wasn't up for long touring.
She was writing right up until the end though, and one of the things I thought was so remarkable about her is her advocacy for victims.
Yeah.
She was one of the first people who I think really understood that true crime had an appeal to a mass audience, but it wasn't about glorifying the murderers. It was about really talking about the victims and their families. So
Well, but she also wrote it, it was a novelization form rather than a reportorial form, so it made it, it's like, there's a new thing that's very hot at the moment called biographical fiction, which seems like an oxymoron, but there's a whole bunch of them out at the moment. There's a new book about Hedy Lamarr. It's her true story, but it's a novel, and we just had Winston Churchill's mother here a couple weeks ago, and how that goes. To take real events and then structure a novel with them, but then imagining things to go with it, is an interesting thing for a writer, but it's fun for readers. Part of that, you get to learn all kinds of cool things. Yeah. So your book, without getting to the end, really can't have a sequel. Of all the books I've read lately, this book definitely isn't going to have a sequel. So do you envision writing something completely standalone again, or are you working on a new project together?
We are actually. We have a manuscript for the second book. We're in revisions now. But what we've done is we've figured out a way to sort of have it be a loose series, with each one being a standalone. And we'll take in the book there are these two detective characters, and what we're going to do is we're going to sort of keep them as the through line. So they'll be the thread from book to book, but each will operate as a standalone in terms of plot and.
Okay, so it's the
characters and so forth.
detectives doing the investigation. It's
Right.
not the actual criminals
Exactly.
and victims that
Exactly.
are
So.
and so you're going to stay in Long Island then, because they don't get to suddenly move to Richmond.
No, we'll stay in Long Island for the moment.
we do hope to bring them overseas at some point, just
Yeah.
to get a trip. We were talking, we'd love to do an Irish-Scottish one
Why
to
not?
visit the homeland.
I'm sure you could figure that out. Pardon me while I just tap off there. Yay. What are you thinking about doing? Is your guy, this is his big adventure, or are you thinking about having him do something else?
Well, there is a sequel in the works. The good people at Down and Out Publishing Company had expressed an interest.
Yeah.
So I'm polishing off the sequel now, and I hope to get it to them in the next month or 6 weeks. And then I've outlined another novel, a crime mystery novel that I'm anxious to get started on. I'm really excited about that. And I had finished, in fact, a young adult manuscript that I'm now shopping and hoping to get that going somewhere. So I'm really busy. I like sitting butt in chair.
I can see that. Well, and you probably hear a little pattering of time right behind you saying, write them as fast as you can,
Yes,
right?
it definitely
I had a
is.
conversation with an author from Canada today to wrote to me. He said, I know your first comment to me is going to be you're writing too many books too soon, but he said, I'm as old as you are, so I have to think about how many books I still have in me, or time to write. And I do think, that you're obviously younger, so this isn't such a, I don't know, why is the age part of my thing tonight? I don't know. Oh well. Right, so is there anything you'd like to tell us? I mean, we're just wandering around here. Do you have some pitch of your own that you would like to make for your book that you've practiced up and want to trot out?
I think we had such a great time writing together, and sort of motivating each other, and the way we wrote it is we would actually write more or less in real time. So each response would be sort of a response to the chapter before, and we sort of toggled back and forth that way, and that really kind of motivated us. It really sort of directed the plot in a lot of ways. So I think that it gives it a certain energy doing it that way. That we just had.
You couldn't really do this though without technology, unless you're somehow sharing an office. Is technology what makes it possible for you to do this? You're
more or less
sharing it back and forth over the.
Right, we're in a document. We're just sharing back and forth. So I'm reading one of Liz's chapters, and I'm sort of formulate an idea of how I'm going to respond to that one, and we're throwing each other curveballs.
So
but
it's
technology
a Google
is certainly
document kind of a thing that
exactly.
you're doing.
But the technology is very certainly instrumental.
And one of the other things is, I think for a long time in my writing process, I felt it was very daunting to try and finish a book, and I was trying to figure out what it was that was kind of standing in my way, and I realized when I looked at my day job, I was really being accountable to getting things done if I was accountable to other people. So having Greg, depending on my chapter coming, made me finish, and it became a kind of writing style and process that was the most successful after writing for many, many years and having many unfinished things. So I think when writers ask us what we recommend and how to write their own stuff, it's to find what works for you and your personality, and then lean into that. So if you're someone who you can sit down and make a word count every day, that's brilliant, and go with that. But for me, it was I didn't want to disappoint him.
Wow, yeah, I can see that would be a definite spur. When we were talking to Greer and Sarah, the authors of An Anonymous Girl, as two different people, they didn't adopt a single pseudonym. One of them was an editor, but the other was a published, I can't remember, 7 or 9 novels
And
ahead of time.
Greer was her editor.
And Greer was her editor, and Doug Preston, Blinken Child was Doug's editor for his couple of books. So I've always thought that was an interesting thing, to go from being an editor of an author to being an author with an author would be an interesting and somewhat challenging shift in dynamic. But you guys went from, well, you didn't have to go from those kinds of relationships. You just were friends and wanted to collaborate. So you didn't have a previous power structure in play, right?
Although I think my having been in publishing and my personality type being kind of more type A and neurotic, and Greg not having the behind the scenes, kind of agitation that I did,
Probably helped.
and being the most laid back person I've ever met really helped.
We balanced each other pretty nicely on that.
Yeah, I can certainly see that. Wow, okay. Do you work with anybody, or is yours an entirely individual experience?
I work with a whole bunch of people, and they're all voices inside my head. I don't know how many personalities I have. I haven't bothered to count. But they're all in there somewhere. No, the answer is no, I don't. I proposed it with one good friend of mine, but we're both so busy, we just haven't gotten around to starting the first chapter. But I think it would be fun to do what Child and Press, what they do, because it seems to me you just write one chapter and send it over, and they modify it and then write the second and send it back. Is that right?
I've talked to a number of people who write, or pairs of authors, and they each have a different way of going about it. I was, as a young reader, very fond of a pair of authors that wrote as Manning Coles. I've always absolutely loved A Toast to Tomorrow is possibly my favorite thriller. I mean, it's just absolutely brilliant. And when one of them died, the other's voice was lost and never could write again.
Wow.
So there was a synthesis that they had together that was not sustainable for either of them. Well, don't know about the one who died, but the one who survived anyway. And then we found out, when Mary Frances died, that she had actually written all the Dick Francis books. But I don't believe that he wrote them with her. I think he was the expert. I think that Dick provided, the experience and the background and so forth. But and so when she died, they never came to life. And now his son is writing them, and they're different. So there seems to be an alchemical thing that happens when two people write together that creates a third voice, not necessarily your voice or Greg's voice, but a third voice. that you can't really replicate with another person or possibly sustain on your own. Would you, I mean, you've only done this once, so, you know, you'd only be guessing, but would you imagine that might be true?
Yeah, and I think it's a beautiful way to put it, this kind of third voice, the unified voice. I mean, I think the only other version, I think, where we were practicing this and not realizing it is when we were acting together and doing scene work and improvising and kind of being able to intuit, you know, what the other person, where they're going, or what they kind of want out of the experience, or the dynamics of characters, and then that grew into, I think, the writing process, and also just knowing each other for so long. I mean, we're not married to each other. We've never been married to other people, but we had very similar examples of marriage, and I think that informs a lot about the characters we developed.
Sort of complementary sensibilities, and then sort of try to, I think, meet each other's style in the middle, and that probably does bring it out.
You wrote
shared
in
style.
alternate voices in your book, you know,
Yes.
which is a little bit different than other, we sometimes, you know, pairs of authors write, it's a single voice.
Right.
Manny Coles, it was Tommy Hamilton, you know, that was the, so you probably can be a little more distinct if you're writing separate chapters.
Certainly, but because we're writing from different POVs, but we did try to keep the tone of it, you know, cohesive, so that it does read as a.
Right, are you gonna continue that structure, or are you gonna continue to write different points of view?
We've done sort of the same structure model, more or less, for the second book, and that
But
seems to be working.
you might one day merge into a single voice.
Yeah, potentially.
Might, I know, I mean, it's exciting to think about it as a writer, isn't it, to imagine other things you might do.
I like the idea. I'm actually keen on writing in different genres. My first novel was police procedural romance humor, and my second novel was a historical set in the Civil War. And I loved writing them both. And this one is a thriller, and then the sequel will be a thriller. So it's a lot of fun to just try different things and see where your skills really lie, and
Or develop new ones.
or develop new ones,
Yeah.
or to see where readers really peg into what you're doing and what they like, and maybe if it sticks, stay with it.
Good point. Patrick King, I'm sorry that I ran you out, sort of, but come on back. I'm going to say farewell to our video audience, and we appreciate your joining us. Thank you so much.